All right, so today we're going to be going over Qpro by QuantVue. Now, this is going to be a really in-depth kind of guide and breakdown on how I use it, other ways of using it. This video is going to be a little bit longer than most, so go ahead and make sure you take notes, and let's get right into this. The first thing that you want to do to open it up is going to be going to your invite-only scripts and find the QuantVue Qpro version 2. And we are going to go ahead and open it and apply it right on the chart. Now, the first thing you'll notice is like, man, there's a lot here, right? There's a lot going on. And that's because this is really 3 indicators kind of built into one. And what I want to do is go over each one of them one at a time. And so the first thing I'm going to do is it's really 4. The first thing that I'm going to do is use the qwave. Let's just turn everything off except for the qcloud. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust the session time. So the session time will add a nice little background color. I'm just going to pick American New York. And now we can see this nice background color on our trading session, right? So this helps, when identifying when the trading session that you want to trade starts and ends. And one of the things that I personally like to do is kind of just turn this down to, I don't know, 1555, just so if I am trading, I'm kind of just in the zone and not paying attention, that I can see that all of a sudden the blue will stop printing on this last candle here, or the last couple candles. And that way I know, hey, this is the last like 5 minutes of the trading day. And you can also adjust it for different stuff. Personally, I like to trade. I'm starting to trade a little bit earlier in the morning. So I'm trying to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and catch London going into New York session. And that's turning out to be really nice. So typically I'd probably just change this to 5, but for this example, I'll leave it on 9:30. The next setting down is just going to be the qcloud. Now the qcloud is literally these green and red ribbon flips, right? This is already a really powerful tool right out of the box. I'm using a NQ exclamation point. I'm on a 1 second chart and Renko size of 4, traditional. But this is right out of the box. This is an amazing setting just for this. It basically allows you to see big moves. It allows you to, know when to get into a trade. And when this ribbon flips is basically when the top qcloud period, which is I have set to 19, and this last one cross over each other. And that cross turns all of them. And then if I turn on show bulls and bear signals, you can see where it actually starts to cross and where we start getting bear signals and where we start getting bull signals. Now, the thing about this is if you're going into news or you're going into a chop period of time, right, you can get chopped up like this. If you just followed these signals, this is a bear signal, this is then a bull signal. That's about a break-even trade. But if you get like a bull and bear really quickly sometimes, like this would be a bull signal here, and then we get a bear signal, so that would be a loss, but then the next trade is into a win. So you kind of don't want to just follow those signals, and typically most of our users will keep the bulls and bear signals turned off and just use this. Now, something that I wanted to know is that you can make this more responsive or less responsive just by kind of adjusting these last 2 periods. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put this period to, let's just put this period to 70. So it's just one above the 9 here. And you can see, actually, let me turn on the signal so you can see what that does. So if I turn this now to 70, you'll see some of these signals start to move right here specifically. So you see we enter on this Renko here, but if I turn that down to 70, you'll see it enter on a little bit quicker, just barely. So it's not not a huge difference, but if you want to try to scalp faster and take quicker moves, you might want to adjust these periods. And I would suggest maybe only to adjust them in small amounts. But overall, the default settings I think are great. So you can just turn off the bear signals, bulls and bear signals, and I like to just leave it like this. The other thing that I like to do with this is a lot of times come into the style, and I like to turn off the DSMAs for the ones in between. Helps just not have as much clutter. And so now I'm just seeing the top band and the lower band. And then I like to adjust those colors kind of to just something that's not as doesn't match my Rinkos. So you can do this by adjusting the Rinko color or adjusting the colors in here. Personally, I'm just a big fan of using teal and using teal for this one, and then just using let's just use teal and teal. So now it's all teal. So now I'm just looking for these crosses, right? So when they cross, look, they cross right there. Now I have this push down, we have a cross here, and we have this push up. The other thing you could do is I would just make this one a different color here, like that. So there we go. So now we have this orange and teal line. This is just the way that I personally like to have it, just because it's a little bit less cluttery, something along those lines. So the next indicator that we have is the Q bands. Now, first off, there is an upper and lower band and the Q band itself. Now, the upper and lower bands are turned off, and part of this is because the upper and lower bands are inside of the qwave setting, which is going to be the next setting down, and a little bit better formulas, and I don't see any point in using the upper and lower bands on the Q bands themselves. So it's kind of just redundant, but they are there if you want to turn it off. So the band deviation would have to do with the upper and lower bands. But we're going to just keep that off. The band length is going to be 77 by default. And here's your trend period. Now, by making this lower, right, you're going to see it be more sensitive, right? And by making the length higher, it's going to be more trend. So this will also depend on like your Rinko size. So when I'm on a Rinko size of 5, 77 is a great setting. If I'm on a Rinko size of 4, I sometimes like to turn it down just a tad, ever so slightly. So maybe down to like 65 or maybe even 60. And then what I like to do is adjust the trend maybe to be 15, and you'll see if I adjust the trend to be 15, if you look right here where this green turns to red, right? I'm going to go ahead and turn that up to 30 so you can see how this moves. Boom. So what I'm looking for on this is I want this to catch the big moves, right? And I don't want it to hold all the way back into this pullback, right? So this is holding all the way into here. I kind of would like it to get out around this area around there, and so I kind of want it to be something closer to like 15, where it's getting out pretty early, but then you can see that we have a flip to green right here, back to red really quickly though. Right here you can see we have a nice flip to green, and by the time we get out, it's for a little bit of profit. So the idea is that this is going to help you identify where the market's going, and these stay in these bigger moves a lot of times. And so that's kind of the way that I use the Q bands, and you can use this on any time frame, any settings that you want. I think it's a really powerful tool. Let me go ahead and turn on the session again so we can see the sessions. The other thing that I would say too is that I like to adjust it where the band is constantly being tapped but not going through, which is kind of you can see this right here. A lot of times we'll get these touches using this band, right? That's a touch, where touches, and we are getting this nice continuations down off of it. Now this isn't this indicator is not made for these touches, but it definitely is something that happens and it can be traded. Just something that I wanted to point out, something just for people to be aware of. The next setting is we're going to turn that off. And this is where we're going to go into the QWave settings. Now the QWave is honestly just one of my favorite tools. And you can see the bulls and the bear signals right off the rip. First off, the first thing that I'm going to do is go into the QWave settings. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to just turn off the bull and bear signals. I just don't like them on my chart. I think it makes the chart look cluttery. First, default settings doesn't look that powerful, right? It's not really doing anything. It's kind of just moving, and we're getting some weird bounces here and there. This is not ideal for me, right? So let's go ahead and jump into kind of the settings that how I would tweak it for NQ. And keep in mind, you can tweak this for anything, but the default QWave settings that I'd be using on NQ would be the 33 look back. I would use weighted 256, but the band deviation, I want to open up the band deviation to something closer to 5.5. At 5.5, you can see how we start to interact on NQ on a traditional box size Renko 4 with a 1 second chart. You can see that we are getting these bounces off the top and lower bands that we're a lot of times tapping them and coming back up, and tapping them very close to tapping, come back up. Or we go outside of it, and what happens when we push outside of it, we have a nice push back. We tap it here, having a little rejection. And we're constantly interacting kind of with the upper and lower bands here. Let's just go to a different day. You can see top line bounce right here, and then we reject, go to the downside. Bottom line bounce that kind of lines up with a little liquidity sweep. Back up, where do we trade up to? The top band. Now, the band deviation of 5.5 on NQ on this setting is very, very powerful, and I'm a huge fan of it. But that also being said, I wanted to show people what this band deviation would look like on ES, and not on a traditional chart. Let's minimize this. Here's this band deviation, but these are huge box sizes. This is not what I would be interested in looking at this on. I want to show people something that's not going to be Rinkos. Like, what happens if you put this on, let's say, a day chart, right? All right, so now we're out on a day chart, right? And I'm wanting to just adjust this in real time. But this is definitely something that you can use. So you can see that we're having some touches on the lower bands here, but not very many. We're almost never touching the upper band here. So let's go ahead and adjust the band deviation to see if we can get the bands to start to interact. And I'm going to just start with 4 here, see if we can close it up a little bit. So now you can see when we push out of it right there, we're coming very close to touching it there. We're interacting with the bottom of the band a lot now. We're very, very close to having touch on the upper band. And so you can see that we're near the upper band here. Let's adjust it just ever so slightly to have maybe let's see what happens if we go to a higher look back period. We have some interesting interactions. I'm going to adjust the number. I'll look back to 50. Yeah, let's do the 50 maybe. Let's drop the 40. So 40 looks really interesting to me. And then let's drop the band deviation, maybe 3.9 here. And then last thing I want to do is look to see how that starts to look. So now this is looking really, really nice. This is, we're getting these top line touches on the day, right? A push down. We're oscillating on the mid band here. We're getting some strong pushes down. Now, this is not a perfect, a perfect indicator, right? But for example, if we're at the top of the band and we start to push off of it, there's a good chance that we're at least coming to the midline here, right? Same here. This is a daily bias. Let's put it that way. If we have a lot of chop days, right? A lot of tiny days. We say we just had this huge push down, and our next day is a chop day. This next day is completely dodgy, right? That's a dodgy candle, and then the next day we have a push out and then a dip back, but then a push right off of it again, looking very bullish. Where do you think the next 3 days are going to go? And what are we going to touch? And then where are we going to oscillate on, right? So this is something for people to look at on a day chart as well. This is not something that I see very many people talk about, using the qwave on day settings. And this isn't perfectly adjusted, but I wanted to give people the idea of, hey, you can use this on much larger time frames, dailies, weeklies. You can use this on 5-minute charts, right? You do not have to just use the Qpro on. You don't just use the Qpro on Rinkos. Explore outside of it. This is like a really good indicator of kind of where we're going to go, where we're bouncing off of. Look at this midline bounce right here, and then we kind of just see this push up a nice wick right off of it, and we push up. Now we're forming a double top, but this double top also lines up with the upper band. It's this isn't like the perfect settings. I'll try to dial this in a little bit more for ES and maybe share the setting in the Discord channel. So there might be a link to that pinned post in the description below. But for the most part, yeah, qwave is an extremely powerful tool, not just for scalping, which is what I use it for on in Q, right, on a Rinko chart of 4. And I already went over my settings with that, but it's something that I also use on much higher time frames to give me an idea of where we're going, what we're touching. And so next thing that we're going to go over is going to be the qline. Now for this, I'm going to go back to Rinkos. Let's go back to Rinkos. Let's go to NQ exclamation point. Let's go to 1 second. And we have a block size in traditional 4. So the qline is interesting basically because it's been changed a little bit. So basically it's just kind of a nice flip, and the qline is really nice for scalping. So you want to scalp this area here. Once the ribbon flips and we have this down push, once it flips again right here, you have this little push up, and then when it flips again, you have this push down. But again, here, let me just go ahead and turn on the qwave setting in conjunction with this now. So this is kind of like where we start to see some more powerful tools and ideas. I'm going to change that to 5.5. And now you can see that once we come down and we're on the lower band here, right? And we get this nice ribbon flip to the upside. This is a great trade. Where are you going to trade it to? Try to trade it to the mid band, right? And that would be a perfect trade. Let's try to find something else too. You could also kind of see here, we have a ribbon touch right here, but the ribbon doesn't quite flip, right? But then you can see that as we're trying to form these 3 little bottoms, you can see the ribbon tries to flip, fail, the ribbon tries to flip, fail, right? But look, we're rejecting off the midline here, right? We come through it and we fail again, and we come back down. We fail to make a new bottom, and this starts to go green again, and the ribbon flips, and now we have a push up over the midline. This is a great entry. And so it's kind of just a way of having confirmation that's maybe seen a little bit easier on your chart, to know, hey, this is going to be a nice push in or out. But again, you're always going to build this with confluences, right? And this is kind of like a top line bounce, right? So for example, like right now, what do you think we'd be looking for? We'd be looking for, we're at the top of the band. And if we start to push down and we see a nice ribbon flip, we'll probably try to take a trade and try to trade that down to the mid band. So a couple things that I like to do with the Q line is I almost like to use it as an indication to get out of a trade. So for example, if I was to take a long here, I'd be looking for a ribbon flip to then tell me, hey, this trade's over. So we don't get that ribbon flip till this pullback right here. Now, what's also fun to do is to say, make this a little bit more sensitive, give it a length of 5, and kind of see if you can get a more sensitive reaction to it. So that right there is kind of a little ribbon flip. And so that would be my indication to get out of the trade. There's other things that you can do with it. You can use it to initiate a trade on a ribbon flip. So we have this nice push down. We have a ribbon flip relatively quickly now because I have the Q links to 5 and it's off a lower band, and we could then take that and then we could also trade it, or we could trade it and hold it until the ribbon flips on the close of this Rinko right here. That would be a nice little trade. So there's multiple ways of using the Q line. So you can adjust the Q line multiplier as well. Usually the default is set to 0.1, but like, let's just say you crank it up to 3. This is something that you can do, and then you can get what some people refer to as Q line bounces. So you can see when it comes down to here, that would be a Q line bounce. Let's see if we have another Q line bounce. Kind of have a Q line bounce right there. We kind of have another Q line bounce right there. We have a couple Q line bounces right here and a rejection off of it. Another Q line bounce. Personally, this is not a way that I like to use the Q line, but it is something that you can do. And every single ticker is going to be a different adjustment. Every single different time period that you do will be a different adjustments. And you can, all you are is looking to see in simple terms, right? How many times can I get it to interact with the Q line and then reject off of it for a nice move to the upside or the downside, right? And so, you know, again, just everything's going to depend on what you're actually using it on. And then you can adjust it, and you can dial in some great settings there. I've seen people dial in some incredible settings with the Q line inside of oil. Last thing I want to say is that I'm going to start to upload a lot more of my settings into the Discord channel for people to try. I'm going to try to dial in some interesting Q line settings for NASDAQ, ES, and oil are the main 3 that I'm going to focus on. But if there's something else that you want me to dial in using the whole Qpro indicator and want me to share public settings, please feel free to reach out to me in the QuantVue Discord channel at TI Trading Wiz, and I will be more than glad to do that. All right, so last thing I wanted to do was show people kind of how I use these settings in their entirety. So the cloud, this is typically, I just keep it on default settings 90% of the time, and I usually toggle it on and off, and I do change how it looks a lot of times like that, but sometimes a lot of times I'll just use the default settings and use the default colors. The Qband, these are kind of the settings that I use for the Qband on a NQ chart with a traditional 4 size Rinko on a 1 second chart. These are the qwave settings that I personally like to use. And these are the qline settings that I personally like to use. I like to use the qline again as a way to tell me when to get out of the trade. So like if I was to take this trade off of, pretty early today, off of this line, I would be entering into the trade once we kind of get this flip on the Q line. There's other reasons why I had this level actually marked as near the previous day's high. It was just a high point of potential rejection. And you can kind of see how we reacted to the zone overnight. So I already was looking for shorts off this level. Once we got confirmation, and you could have stayed in this trade literally all the way to this green until we get this flip on the Q line. That would have been a great trade. That would have been a roughly about a 6-to-1, 7-to-1 risk to reward. I like to keep my stops at 10 when I'm trading in Q a lot of times. Sometimes I do get stopped out by having a really tight stop, but typically my winners, like you can see, this would be a midline bounce, a rejection off of it, continuation to the downside. I can see on this on the Q band right here that we flipped over to red, and that looks like most likely we're going to continue pushing down. Nice big nice midline bounce and confirmation right here. You can take the trade. So now we're 3 or 4 bars, made a new low right here, and we're going to try to push out of this. Now what's nice about this is, again, if you just did the Q line and held till it flipped over, it doesn't flip over till right here, right? And so that's another nice beautiful trade today. That would have been a 10 let's see, that would have been an 8-to-1 risk to reward. This level right here, I think this was like a fib level. It was also a known pivot level, also like a previous support level. So there's a lot this trade had going for it, and it's also we outside the lower bands. We're going back, chopping back into the bands, right, and looking for that push out of it. And once we get confirmation on the Q line, we could take that trade and have a nice 10 point stop, and see if we can get a nice push out of this. Now, if you wanted to stay in this trade, you could stay in this trade all the way to the top of the Q bands. That would have been a nice 3-to-1. If you wanted to stay in the trade all the way to we get back to this level right here, on the top band, that's also valid. Now, a lot of times how I trade is I'm taking 4 contracts at a time, or sets of 4. So for example, on my larger accounts, I do take 20 contracts sometimes. So if I took 20 contracts right here, I would have probably sold some of them right at this level, right after we closed above the midline. I would have at least sold off 5 of them, right? And then I would have brought my stops to break even. My next trade would be selling the next lot of 5 at the top of the top band right there. That would have been just locking in some profit. I would bring up my stop to at least the midline, but most likely above the midline here, right? So probably about halfway, I would bring my stop to about that level. So now I would still be in for 10 contracts. You can see how we have this nice wick. So once after we have this nice wick and we have a little pullback and we failed to break that wick, right? Now I'm moving my stop up to that level, because now I know if we break this wick, I would have after this, we have this wick right here, this push up, I would have brought my stop up to this wick. And the main reason why I was like, if we came back and we broke this wick, there's a good chance that we're going to go all the way to the midline, and I want to lock in some of my profits. So as long as I don't get stopped out there, I would continue holding and holding and holding and holding and holding. And now we're pushing out of the Q bands. It's potentially that we're going to continue up, but keep in mind that this is a previous level of support, which will now turn into potentially a level of resistance. So I would be watching this zone very, very carefully. And the other thing is, I can tell you just by looking at it, is that this has now traded back into the golden pocket. So in between the 5 and the 618, I guarantee you. So let's see. Now, when I'm drawing fib levels on NQ, I'm drawing them on the leg. So this would be a golden pocket pullback on this leg here, right? So if I go do that, you can literally see we pull back into the 618 and the 5 basically. And so there is a high probability that this might reject in this area. And that's exactly what we end up getting. And we almost end up getting a nice pull. Let's see if I align this fib up perfectly. Yeah, we almost even get a nice pullback all the way to the 236 and almost a rejection off of that. But I think it's interesting that then we come back up, we fail on the 5, and we continue push down. But I would have probably closed out definitely the next set of contracts at that level. That would have been my third take profit, and then my the last 5 contracts I most likely would have just got stopped out on, because after I took that, I would probably move my stop up to this level, so I'd get out of the last couple ones right here. Or I might have even sold them off earlier, just depending on how strong or how likely I thought that we were going to push through that level. And this also would have to deal with like, are we above or below the 200 moving average? Are we above or below the 50 moving average? How strong is this push? Does this push line up with the 200 and we've just got really a strong rejection off of it? So these are all things that you have to use in Confluence with each other. So it's not a perfect, oh, just you're going to trade when this ribbon flips and then pray for the best, right? No, that's not trading. You're going to take multiple confluences, multiple levels, use fibs. But overall, once you can build 2 or 3 or 4 confluences on a trade, now that's good. That's a high probability trade. The other thing I highly suggest is you always take trades that you have at least a 2-to-1 risk to reward. If you're not going to get a 2-to-1 risk to reward, I personally wouldn't trade it unless you're really good at scalping, unless you can have like a high win rate, hyper scalping. There are people in QuantVue, Trade Oracle is one of them, that will have a 80% win rate hyper scalping, and not always take potentially bigger losses, but because his win rate's so high, his risk to reward is kind of he can have smaller risk to rewards. So that's kind of it, inside of just kind of going over a brief overview on how I use this in conjunction with in Q, how I use this on day charts, to help me get an idea and a feel to understand if I think that we're going to start coming back down. Now, I also want to point this out that I use the Qwave on a weekly chart as well. And I will see if I can share some of those settings inside the QuantVue Discord channel. Anyways, that's it for this video. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. And if you have any questions, hit me up in the Discord channel. Peace.